Hi, I wanted to take some time today to show you how I am automating some of my Revit processes here for some of the structural design tasks that I'm working on. One of the last videos I made was different AI models, extracting information from PDFs, putting those into spreadsheets. I thought that was really interesting. I'm working on that same project right now, and what I'm trying to be able to do is help automate the team's drafting processes. So we're redesigning these steel moment frame connections. And when they become redesigned, what we need to do is we need to start drafting up drawings to tell the contractors and the other people associated on the job, hey, this is what the redesign needs to look like. So how was this process happening before? Well, it was very condition specific. We'd have a specific condition that we wanted to go ahead and model. First few, we were just modeling line work and other objects in Revit families, creating different views. And then based off the views that we would have, we'd populate a sheet, we'd cut different sections, and then we'd get to our final products. But for me, when I was working on this, it really felt like we were utilizing the same reinforcement details at multiple project points. And I felt like this was a really interesting opportunity to say, hey, we're doing a lot of quote unquote repetitive work. Is there a way that we could infuse artificial intelligence into this so that way some of that tedious, repetitive work was something we can kind of offload to an AI system? So a little bit of background here, using Revit 2025, and I was able to connect an MCP server to Revit. Shout out to Lou Datillo. That's the GitHub repo that I'm using right now. And initially, this was an MCP for Claude. And you can go ahead, and if you look here in the add-ins tab, there is this MCP panel, and this is what the user would use to talk to Claude. Since then, no shade to Claude, but I wanted to see if I was able to get another AI model to work via that MCP. So right now, what you're looking at is Grok 4.6, and I'm using Grok 4.6 to interact with my Revit model. So I know that you could use the CLI, and for what I'm really doing right now, the CLI would suffice. But where I see this workflow going, I kind of was game planning this weekend, and I've been playing around a lot with Grokbot, and I saw a lot of opportunity to use Grokbot to help me run routines, run different drafting protocols and workflows off a standardized routine. So I use the Grokbot interface, and here I've created a Revit bot. I've created a bunch of bots, and I'll probably go into each one of those in more detail from now on. In the future, I'll go through those. But right now I have a Revit bot, and what that Revit bot is doing is it's interacting with the Revit account that you're seeing on the screen via the CLI, but the interface for which I'm communicating with it is the Grokbot desktop application. One of the reasons why I'm doing that, like I said, is the routines. The other one is I'm able to add pictures here, which I guess I can use in the CLI. But there's also like the plus sign here, so you could teach it a task as well, which I think is interesting. So playing around with these types of things. So what does this workflow look like? Well, we have our red lines. So this is a specific connection, and we want to add the following steel, the following welds to reinforce this connection. This is C14 on the north end. We're putting like this finger plate on top of the flange to reinforce that. And what we want to be able to go ahead and do is reflect that here in the drawings. So like I was saying before, typically what we would do is find a condition similar to this, copy and paste it, go in, try to draft on top of this copy and pasted detail, change all the member sizes, change the grid lines. Very tedious, very manual process. And like I said before, I was noticing patterns as I was working on this that a lot of these details were repeating. And the things that were changing were the condition specific details, but the actual reinforcement details themselves were relatively similar. So what I was game planning to do was I have saved locally for this elevation the specific shop drawings and the reinforcement markups. So if I were to open Bluebeam, this is your reinforcement markup, and then the shop drawing is going to look something like this. So we're at C14, which is this four-way connection up here. This guy here is what we want to model, right? And for us, it's very important, since this is an already existing condition, that all of the member sizes in our Revit model are correct, the bolt hole counts are correct, the bolts are correct, bolt counts are correct, and then obviously all the dimensions have to be correct. That's the whole point of this job. So what I was able to go ahead and do was I first started out by creating in Revit a view purpose that is just typical AI details. So created its own folder. They're just AI details. And what I did was I was going through the entire file that we had, and I was isolating repeatable reinforcement types. So we've got one here, if you're looking at like the cross section of this beam, we've got the finger plates on top, we've got extension plates on the flanges, and this is top and bottom flange. So this beam section is something that occurs multiple times throughout the drawing set, so I created a typical of this. Same thing with this cross section here, where we need to increase the moment capacity of the welds at the flanges to the column. This is another typical, so I saved that within the typicals. This plate details, where we show like all the piece marks and their dimensions. This was another typical, and I was saving all of these in the typical AI details portion of my Revit model. So once I had that, what else would I do? I was trying to forecast all the different types of conditions that we were going to need to model in Revit. So I went to different plan sections and I started looking at, okay, I need a 4-way connection, I need like the 3-ways connection, the 2-way connection, all these different types of configurations, because when I was experimenting with the CLI and with the Revit bot that I had built, Revit was really good at like copying a detail and changing specific parameters associated with it, but it wasn't as good with going from like 0 to full line work to make really pretty details. That's where I felt like it was really lacking, was, hey, if I just told the Claude MCP to go out and model this connection just verbally, the line work that it would get was really shitty, to be honest, and I didn't love it. So I wanted to keep the same like standard and style of the existing drawing set together. So the way that I did that was I took some of those, I saved them as typicals, and the next portion of what I did was I would go to my Revit bot, and what we're doing now is we have this spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is what we use to communicate what drafting things have been completed. And I'll show you what that spreadsheet looks like here. So this is at level 2 right now. These are all the connections that the Revit bot is working on currently. But what we're able to go ahead and do is identify, okay, what types of connections do we need to still model in Revit and get on drawing spaces, and which ones do we not? So what I would do is I would give Revit the specific joint location, the type of section that is needed, and then from there, I also gave it access to the local folder with the shop drawings and with the reinforcement markups. And what the Revit bot ended up going ahead and doing was understanding, okay, this connection happens at a specific location within the drawing set. What are the members that are framing into this specific location? So if you look at this one here, this is just like the typical, and this one is not the correct version, because the corrected version is here. And what I think is really cool, what the AI did was it looked through the shop drawings and it changed the specific member sizes based off of what it was reading on the shop drawings. It also was able to go to the grid lines and change the grid lines based off of the condition type at the joint that I had given it. And also it was able to go and pick up all of the bolt counts and their alignments correctly as well. It drafted out these plates. This plate can get drafted a little bit better. Like there should be a dashed line, because how it's looking is you have the extended plate on the bottom, and then on top of that is the finger plates that you're going to see. But I think these are smaller details. It was able to also come in here and cut these different sections, label the sections, and then get the correct reinforcement detail. And now this was based off of the reinforcement PDF, that red line. It was able to pick up which reinforcement details it needed based off of what it was reading in that PDF, cut the proper sections for them, and then populate that here on page. That's incredibly powerful. Like a human like myself would sit down and I would do that, and it would probably take me, I don't know, 30 minutes per connection just to get it kind of in this mucky state where like everything is there, but you really want to go through it and fine tune the detail. think it would take a lot of time to get there. The Revit bot that I have set up right now is able to do that. And what I was doing was just giving it a joint location, telling it, hey, create a sheet for this. It creates the entire sheet, and then it goes into the typical details that we've created, and it pulls out the most applicable ones, puts them on the sheet, looks back at the shop drawing PDF, looks at the markup and the red line of the redesign calculation, and then starts making changes to the Revit model based off of what it is reading there. I thought that was incredibly powerful, and the ability for it to get the proper wide flange sizes here at this connection, the proper column size, and let me see if I have this plan section. This is not just line work for this member. It was able to actually go into the Revit settings and change the wide flange shape. So it's not like this is just looking at text and changing text on drawings. It actually went into the member property and changed the member property based off of what it was reading off the PDF drawing. That's really powerful, in my opinion. So we got it to do that. Obviously, you're going to see some things like it was trying to call out different welds here along the flanges, and it got some of the tails right, but the leaders are wrong. Same thing with these web stiffeners. Like he's got web stiffeners right now running through the cross section of the column web, which is obviously wrong. But these are smaller things, and I really think that if I was able to get 60 to 70% on the initial sheets setup and have it be accurate per our reinforcement red lines that we have and the shop drawing that we have in-house, me and the other engineer that were working on this, we already were like, this has already saved us so much time just by being able to set up the sheets and get us to like 60 to 70%. So very, very happy with how the Grok model is working here. I'm going to give the Anthropic model a chance as well to kind of see if it's better in some cases or worse in some cases. I don't know, but I will give it a shot as well. Another interesting thing too is when it's setting up these sheets, I didn't have to explain what the nomenclature was. It just read all the sheets and it figured out what the nomenclature was, which I thought was very interesting. And the same thing with the nomenclature for the different drawing like title names and things like that. Like it's able to really pick up on those patterns, understand what they are, and then apply them in the future at scale until you tell it that it's doing something wrong. But it hasn't done anything wrong from what I can tell so far, from like a nomenclature perspective. So I thought that was very fascinating. Trying to foresee maybe some of the questions that I would get here, like is Grokbot really needed to run this workflow in its current state? No, it's not. You could probably use the CLI to do that. But like I was saying previously, where this workflow is now of me working on it for a few days versus where I see it being in like a week or 2 weeks from now is night and day. I think one of the most powerful things about the Grokbot desktop application that I've been working with over the weekend is you're able to start creating routines. So you can create different bots for those that are not familiar with Grokbot, and you can go ahead, create a routine and agentically orchestrate all these different bots to run a very specific task at a very specific time interval. So where do I see this going here for this workflow? So right now, all these files that I'm working on are locally saved. I didn't want to unleash the AI system into a company's SharePoint at this moment in time. One of the reasons for that is obviously data security. I was trying to look up different ways to build like a SharePoint bot in a sense that would go in and be like my custodian within the SharePoint. I was reading a lot about Composio. I heard that they had some sort of a data breach in the relatively recent future. So that didn't make me feel great, to be quite honest. So I'm going to lay off that for a second. But what I was able to go ahead and do is with Grokbot, you have these virtual machines that you could spin up. And through those virtual machines, you can go and log in to different accounts. So I could log into my SharePoint account without having to deal with Composio. My features and functionality is definitely limited when doing this, but it's able to at least read the documents on the SharePoint and then pass that information along to the Revit bot, and the Revit bot will go ahead and it'll go to work. Where I see this workflow going in the future, though, is when me or the other engineer that's working on this, when we create this red line and we throw it in a folder, right now I need to instruct the Revit bot to look into the folder, pick up the red line, and go draft it. What I would like to be able to start building out is, hey, let's build a routine where the Revit bot is looking in this folder, I don't know, every 30 minutes throughout the workday. And every time a new redline is dropped into that folder, it immediately is able to identify the condition that we are trying to redesign or we're trying to draft. And it goes and it starts that drafting process unprompted without us having to do anything, without us having to tell anything. The reason why this is super powerful is because him and I, we could work on just the redesign calculation portions of this. And as we're finishing, just throw them in the folder. And by the time we're finished with all the redesign calculations and markups, we can go and jump into a Revit model and into drawings that are already, if not finished drafting like a first draft, they're already done. And for us, that is going to save like half the time that it would take us from drafting, and it's going to allow us to really get into the details of what we're trying to work on. Something that I notice when I work is like if I'm just copying, pasting, it's really like human slop in a sense where it's like I'm just taking things, kind of like changing them a little bit, creating this whole new sheet. In that process, there's still a lot of decision fatigue. And I feel like if I could alleviate a lot of my bandwidth just to jump into like a sheet like this and look for what's wrong or look for like what could be better, what could be fine tuned, I think that's a way better option for me to use my limited cognitive ability. Is really focusing that on like, hey, I'm looking at something that's like 50 to 60% done. How can we make it much, much better? And that's how I really want to spend my time. I don't want to spend it doing this typical drawing sheet setup and all these different things that are really just copy and paste tasks that I could prove to you that AI can do right now. And it's only going to get better at doing these things. So I have a lot of optimism for the whole Grokbot setup that we're working on here. I know that this Revit workflow that we have going on here probably isn't like to a T the best way to use Revit. By no means am I like a Revit BIM expert. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm always trying to learn more. I know that there's like Revit 360 and all these different ways to manage all these different models and all this different data. Currently, what we're doing is just saving Revit files to a share drive. When you want to work on a Revit file, you download it locally, you work on it locally, and then you can go and put it back on the share drive where the manager of these things later on will take all of these different changes and incorporate them into one governing model. So that's kind of the workflow that we're living within right now. But I don't think that really stops these things from being very valuable and very useful. And again, this is the workflow that I'm working in, that I'm living in every day. And I want it to be as efficient and as best as possible for myself and for my team that I'm working with right now. So for me, I've had a lot of success here with the Revit bot. I would implore anyone with the ability to set up an MCP that works in Revit all the time to at least just like experiment with it. You don't have to go ahead and open up like the whole model. It's a very sensitive information. You could literally just open up Revit, use a sample project that it gives you, and use the MCP to just access that information, just so that you're comfortable with like understanding how the system works and how you can go ahead and automate that kind of stuff. It sounds technical in nature, but I think with a lot of these AI systems, like that's how I really figured it out. Like, yeah, I went to a GitHub repo and I was reading through it to set it up. But at the end of the day, I went to Anthropic, or maybe I went to ChatGPT, and I said, and I have the local desktop application, so it has the commands PowerShell abilities to like interact with my computer. And I asked it, hey, would you mind going in, installing this MCP, so that way I can interact with my Revit via the command line, the CLI. That's how this all started. I was working with that over the weekends, and from there I started playing with Revit and with the Revit bot that I had built in Grokbot. And that's kind of where that workflow is migrated to, just because I really want to take advantage of the routine functionality within the Grokbot. So these are all things that I'm going to be working towards here into the future. I don't want to sit here and act like, oh, well, these AI systems now have completely removed the need for human drafters. Definitely not true. You're looking at the details of this, there's a lot of incorrect pieces of information that need to be fixed up, that need to be cleaned up. And if you don't know what's going on with this project, these AI systems, they will make mistakes, I'm sure of it. I might not have seen one yet in my limited sample size of working through this stuff, but maybe they will make mistakes, and you need to understand what the mistakes are so that way they don't end up on your drawings. The advantage of what this is doing is it gets you off of 0 and into like that 50, 60, 70 percentile of completion phase without you having to really lift up a finger and do much. You already have these drawings that you're referencing for your design. You already have these AI systems, hopefully, that you're using in some capacity, and you already have this Revit model that you're looking to set up. If you're able to systematize and create typical details that you want the AI to follow, and you give it the full context of all this information that you're operating off of, it does a really good job of getting you off of zero, getting you to that 50, 60, 70%. And now you, as the engineer, you get to come in and finish it the last 40%, last 30%. Going to save a lot of cognitive load, going to save a lot of your time. And really when you're coming in, like looking as a reviewer, it's much more different than like the creator. I think you alleviate blind spots. It's like that thing, like when you're looking at the same problem over and over again, sometimes you like put on the blind spots and you don't see certain things. When you're not the original drafter of this and you come in as a reviewer, I think you look at the sheet differently and you're able to clean it up and make it make more sense because you're trying to understand it and read through it. And it's not your work, it's somebody else's work, it's the AI's work. So I think it's really helpful creating a better drafting and drawing product. So we're going to keep experimenting with this. This is a 72-hour iteration of what I've been able to spin up here since like Friday evening. It's now Monday evening. So I really think that there's a lot of potential here, and we're going to keep building that out. And as I come up with new types of automations and new workflows that I think are really interesting and very valuable to me and hopefully to you watching this video, I would love to share those all with you. So this has been super, super interesting. My next videos in the future are probably going to be a lot of Grokbot videos because I'm incredibly impressed with the Grokbot application and what I've been able to build out on it. I've automated more life features over the weekend than I think I've automated cumulatively to this date. So that's been an interesting experience, and I look forward to sharing that with you all as well. Like always, if there's anything that you want me to work on or any workflows that you're interested to see, like how I think AI could be infused into those, please feel free to drop a comment. Would love to be able to work with you there if you see an opportunity to do so. And if you have the time, please subscribe. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I'm going to be putting out a lot more content here moving forward. This is truly an awesome time to be a structural engineer, civil engineer, working with these different AI systems. I think it's incredible. I feel very lucky and very blessed to be in this position. So thank you for your time if you made it this far, and I look forward to making more awesome content for you. So bye. Have a good one.